So I think when we start to piece some of these things together, there's reasons why some of the greatest journalists, greatest historians, greatest lawyers and thinkers of all time have stopped and been like, wow, there's a powerful case that Jesus lived, died, buried, and appeared to people on the third day.
Let's get to the heart of this conversation. There is a sighting, a Jesus sighting that happened about 2,000 years ago, and they say the tomb is empty. What evidence do we have today that gives us confidence that the resurrection is a historical fact?
So there's at least 20 to 21 arguments for the empty tomb that cumulatively make a powerful case. One of the most compelling is in regards to who discovered the empty tomb. Now, all four Gospels report that women discovered the empty tomb. We read that in our modern culture, and we don't think twice about it. But in that patriarchal culture, a woman was typically not educated the same way as a man. In fact, there's some ancient Jewish proverbs, not in the scriptures, that says, better the words of the law burnt than delivered to women. They were looked down upon. And so put yourself in the position of the gospel writers. If they're inventing a story of an empty tomb and they want to convince people that this is true, who are the least likely witnesses they would invent, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to be persuasive? And the answer is they obviously wouldn't invent women. That would be counterproductive. So the reason they report women, the most likely reason, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John heard a story that they believe, and they're passing on what they think is true. So that's one reason that it's kind of called the criterion of embarrassment, that people don't invent material to intentionally embarrass themselves and disparage their message. So when writers include that, it's because they care more about truth than the perception. So women discovering the empty tombs is very, very significant. There's more than this. Another one I think is interesting is that Jesus was buried in Jerusalem. Now, what's interesting about this is if you're going to go invent a story that's not true, the hardest place to do this would be in Jerusalem. Because somebody would say, okay, wait a minute, we actually know Joseph of Arimathea. We know the name of the person who had the tomb that buried Jesus. That's pretty amazing 2,000 years later. And his position of authority. They just go check his tomb and see if the body was there. But they don't. Why? Because the body's gone. So the apostles go preach the risen Jesus in Jerusalem, the very city Jesus was publicly crucified and buried in a known tomb, minimally shows incredible confidence that the tomb itself was empty. That's the second one. I'll give you a third one as quickly. It's the first explanation for the empty tomb is that the religious leaders say that the apostles stole the body. That's the explanation. If they say they stole the body, what are they assuming about the state of the tomb?
That it's empty.
That it's empty, right? You don't say to your teacher something like, my dog ate my homework, if you have your homework. So the first explanation from the religious leaders is the apostles stole the body, which shows that the body was gone and the tomb was empty. Now, we could talk about whether or not it's reasonable for the apostles to steal their body, and I mainly think it's not reasonable because, number one, they had to get by the guard, but number two, why would they go out and willingly suffer and be willing to die for something if they stole a body and knew it was false? So I think when we start to piece some of these things together, there's reasons why some of the greatest journalists, greatest historians, greatest lawyers and thinkers of all time have stopped and been like, wow, there's a powerful case that Jesus lived, died, buried, and appeared to people on the third day.
And isn't it true that it's not only in the Bible that we read about Jesus living, dying, being buried, and being seen after he died, but that's also attested to by non-Christian contemporary historians during that time?
So some of those facts, yes. Now, I know you're not implying this, but when skeptics say to me, well, what about outside the Bible? There's kind of an assumption that we can't trust the Bible. I'm telling you, Kirk, if we had none of these other sources, I still think we can trust the accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and other early Christian historians to have confidence that it's true.
Yes, so do I.
With that said, when we go outside of the scriptures, you have writers like Josephus at the end of the first century that affirm the existence of Jesus.
And who's Josephus?
Josephus was a Jewish writer writing on behalf of the Romans in the 90s.
Not a Christian.
He was not a Christian, no. And so he gives basic facts. Jesus, the brother of James, Jesus lived. He was died. There's reports that he's the Messiah. He doesn't give all the details, but he tells details that help support and corroborate the accounts within the Gospels. You get in the 2nd century, you have writers like Tacitus, who's a Roman historian, and he also points to the existence of Pontius Pilate, the death of Jesus, the persecution of early Christians. You find these extra biblical sources. And by the way, there's not a ton of extra biblical sources on anything in that time period at that time. So the fact that they would even talk about Jesus, who's a religious leader in a small corner of the empire that didn't have any political power anyways, is significant. So there are some non-Christian sources that are relatively early that help strengthen the case that we're talking about.
Hi, I'm Kirk Cameron, and thanks for watching the Kirk Cameron on TBN YouTube channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. A couple of things. Please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so that you're notified every time a new video is posted. And be sure to share your takeaway in the comments and invite a friend to join the conversation.